On December 9, 2024, a black Tacoma truck raced down an empty road at 95 miles per hour. Inside the truck was 40-year-old Stephen Collins, his 23-year-old wife Wendy Bailey and their 2-year-old daughter Riley Collins. All of them were unrestrained with no seat belts being used, and Riley was not in a car seat. Stephen drove straight into a tree and the truck ended up wrapped around the tree that the truck hit with full force. Riley was pronounced dead at the scene. Stephen was transported to the hospital where he later died. And Wendy ended up in critical condition in the hospital fighting for her life. Stephen portrays himself to be a loving husband, nurturing father, who just can't believe that God blessed him with such a beautiful life, amazing kids and the love of his life on his social media. He reminds people to cherish the moments of parenthood often, and at first glance, you would think this is a semi-normal loving family of 3, who were involved in a horrific accident, but, one day after the accident, detectives found out that there was another child, 15-month-old Kahleb Collins, who was not found at the site of the crash and nobody knew where Kahleb was. Investigators immediately started the search for Kahleb, and that is when this tragic karma-induced real country of a case became unexpectedly even more horrific than a failure of a deadbeat dad leaving his 2-year-old child unrestrained as he barreled down the road to her death. When you go onto Stephen and Wendy's FB pages, Kahleb photos are almost non-existent while Stephen captures all of the details of Riley coming into the world, from ultrasound photos to her first steps, and proudly posts how lucky he is to be her dad. When you go to Wendy's page, it is the same thing. The only photos of Kahleb are few and far between on their multiple social media accounts. It is almost like Kahleb did not exist. Maybe that is why the 2 doting parents never bothered to inform authorities when Kahleb actually went missing, which is now believed to be in September of 2024, which is 3 months prior to the crash. As detectives started the search for Kahleb, they uncovered something much more sinister and dark than they expected. Why is it that the darkest people are always the ones who go on their social media to praise Jesus and talk about how grateful and thankful they are? Wendy Collins awoke from her critical condition slumber to investigators who questioning her where Kahleb was. Investigators had uncovered some very vile and gruesome photos and texts between the 2 lovebirds. Stephen sent Wendy a text letting her know that he was going to unalive Kahleb, and he followed that with 2 photos. One of the photos was of 15-month-old Kahleb hanging by a rope, with blood all over his tiny body, and the other was a photo of Kahleb, slumped on the floor covered in bruises and blood. Stephen followed those photos with 2 texts, "He is not moving," and "I am so sorry." A few minutes later he sent Wendy another text saying, "He's moving." That is when Mom of the Year, yes that is you, Wendy, text back and said, "He just looks wore out, tired, and hopefully that is all." You are right, Wendy, it's very tiring for a small child who looks up to his parents as protectors and providers, to be bound and hung by a rope while his 44-year-old poor excuse of a deadbeat dad uses him as his punching bag, all while Mommy Dearest does nothing to help him. That is exhausting, Wendy. When investigators questioned Wendy, she admitted that Kahleb was no longer alive. Wendy told detectives that Kahleb had been put into a trash bag and moved into a storage building, believed to be on their property, until he was moved to an undisclosed location. This poor child was treated like trash and disposed of like something you want to get out of sight so you can go on with your life. Kahleb had been missing for months and nobody reported it. Stephen did make a post in November, a month after Kahleb disappearing, stating, "Our son is not doing well. He is not growing and has major back issues. His organs are growing but not his body. He has to have surgery at some point. Keep him in your prayers. Been rough and just seems going to be a long, rough, tough road ahead of us." I don't know if Stephen was setting himself up for an alibi of some sorts, so that he could say he passed away from medical issues, or if he was trying to garner attention for a GoFundMe, but that was Stephen's last social media post. Wendy admitted to having witnessed Stephen physically abuse Kahleb and admittedly did nothing to stop it. In addition to this, Wendy's dad, Kahleb's grandpa John, was also arrested for failure to report a missing child. Grandpa John had custody of Kahleb. There is no information on why, despite the fact he lived with Stephen and Wendy, who he refers to as his best friends on several social media posts. This case is new, so there are a lot of unknowns. We don't know if Stephen's accident was purposeful and planned, which reminds me of the Devonte Hart case where 2 moms adopted 6 children and drove off a cliff in the middle of the night after they caught wind CPS was privy to the abuse they were doling out. But it's such a gruesome way to go about doing that. Unfortunately, Kahleb's body has not been found, and that is why we need your help. If you know anything, if you saw the black truck or any of the involved people, please do the right thing and call the police so we can bring this baby boy home to rest. So, this story has been playing out like taking a raft out for a lazy float day down the river, expecting a few bumps along the way and ending up hurtling over a waterfall instead because this family is straight country. They all have multiple social media accounts where they go by different names. And when you think you have it all figured out, you don't. When I go diving, I don't come up until I am sure I got all the details, but this whole thing is just wild.